Hello friends, we are going to learn how to write in our reading response notebook today. I'm so excited for you to get started on this, so I want you to do it even though I'm not there today. So let's start with knowing where to put things in our reading response notebook. We know that the second half of our notebook is going to be our evidence journal. So like if you have a sticky note here and then everything to the right is your evidence journal, then start at the beginning and you can go ahead and title a page chapter 1, Their Eyes Were Watching God, at the top of your page. So if you don't already have your reading response journal out, go ahead and get that out. Keep listening, stick with us. So I got my title on there, and I know that I need to open up in my handbook to the page that says Reading Response Notebook at the top. It is the page after the Google Classroom directions. So I'll give you a little bit of time now to get to the Reading Response Notebook page. Roberto, if you're not turning to it right now, I'm disappointed. Okay, so we're going to jump in. Quickly get your stuff if you haven't already. So there are 5 basic steps to your reading response. It can get complicated if you do not pay attention to the rubric the first time, or you don't pay close attention to what goes into parts 4 and 5. So part 1, I'm just doing a short summary. This is like things you should have already annotated for at the beginning of the chapter, your 5 W's, just adding in more details. When I say 3 to 4 sentences, I don't mean 3 to 4 like Janie did this thing, sentence. Then she went here, sentence. Give me details about all the important characters in the chapter, what they did, why they did it, where they did it, and maybe if you know when they did it, that would be super helpful. Okay, so 3 to 4 sentences should already take me to about, I'm going to number 1. I know my summary is supposed to go here, and I should write at least like 5 or 6 lines with my summary. So then after that, I would number 2, and for number 2, I put my personal responses and connections. Before we move on to number 2, go ahead and annotate for short summary. You know you need 5 W's at least, with detail. Go ahead and add that annotation into your packet now. Okay, so step 2 is really your impressions, your thoughts. What were you feeling when you read this last night? This is a chance for you to just make connections with the world we live in, with the world that you live in. What similarities are you feeling between you and Janie right now? How is this something that you are having a hard time understanding? First thoughts, first impressions, things that confuse you, just like we've done so far with everything we've read. This is a space to write it all out. I would say you should push to write 3 to 4 sentences here as well. So then at that point, it should take me to about here on my page. There you go. About towards the end of my first page already, if I've written a lengthy summary and I've written a substantial response to what I read. Number 3 is pretty straightforward. Vocab. Any 3 to 5 words in that chapter that you didn't understand, you circled them already in the text, but also you're going to go through, list them out here, and define them. Okay? So I would just say like word, part of speech, definition. I'm not writing out here because I don't think we need further clarification of what this needs to look like. Now as we get to step 4, I'm going to do the actual entry and then help you understand like what I'm expecting for chapter or for part 4 of a reading response. Okay, part 4 is a little bit confusing if you haven't seen an example before. So I'm going to give you an example. So I number part 4, I'm actually on my second page because ideally the first page is thorough enough that it might have filled up. It's okay if you're still on the first page. I think you could do a significant summary and response and still be on the first page, so don't freak out. But ideally you are getting to the end of the first page by the time you start part 4. So part 4, I am analyzing the language and the structure. So I'm picking out literary devices, or in quotes, where I am going to analyze what the author is doing there and talk about the effect that it had on me as the reader and the effect that it has on the text overall. Yes, I know that there's an incomplete sentence here. It's bothering me. I'm sorry if it's bothering you. Okay, so I'm going to this quote on page 11 that really stuck out to me. She was stretched on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees, the gold of the sun and the panting breath of the breeze, when the inaudible voice of it all came to her. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop here. There's two different literary devices here that I could expand on, and I would like to in all of my part 4, but I'm only going to give an example of analyzing this one quote here. So she was stretched on her back beneath the pear tree, soaking in the alto chant of the visiting bees. I'm going to start by writing down my quote. Yes, writing the quote out, so that when Mr. Beck goes back and reads it, or when you share it with a peer, they know exactly which quote you're talking about, and that you can analyze the language that you've written out already. And then I want to include a page number as well. Make sure that you give your page number. Then, let's see what's going on here. So I have imagery, and I know that she's soaking it all in, and she's almost in communication with the bees here. But I wouldn't know this without like the description of the alto chant and this image of Janie sitting underneath the tree, taking it all in. And I know in significance of this whole page, it's talking more about how Janie is becoming one with nature here and having the same experience as the bees, and the bees are a reflection of her perception of marriage and relationships at this point. We haven't gotten to chapter 2 yet, so I don't want to give it away. But I know from this that Jamie is feeling one with nature. So now in my explanation, I'm going to take 2 or 3 sentences to say how that literary device helped me understand the situation that Jamie is going through right now, and what effect it had on me as the reader, and what effect it had on the text as a whole. So I've added a couple sentences of explanation here. Hurston's use of imagery helps the reader to, quote, soak in the nature scene alongside Janie and feel her becoming one with the scene. Her heightened perception of the singing bees reveals how in tune she is with them, and strengthens the symbolism of the pear tree. So I've talked about how the imagery connects to the symbolism of the scene overall. I've talked about how it helps the reader connect with Janie more, and what Janie is going through at this point. So I've got all that going on in just 2 sentences of explanation. You don't have to write a ton to say a ton. And then for the reading responses, you need to write at least one significant, thoughtful response to question 4 or to part 4. I would love to see 2. Okay, so 1 is bare minimum, 2 is you did a significant amount of analysis on this chapter. Then part 5 are questions and follow-up. Sometimes I'll give you questions to answer and glue into your journal. Today you are writing 2 to 3 why questions, so questions that start with why. Sometimes they can start with how, but I would push you to just start with why today. That came up while you were reading chapter 1. So 2 or 3 why questions that you might talk about in a table later, or that you might go back and answer in your journal later on. As far as submitting your journal, 1 entry means that you have all 5 elements. I will not even grade it if you have a missing part. There are times when you'll do a full entry and I'll grade 1 part of it. Sometimes I'll grade the whole thing. Regardless, you need to get the whole thing done, because you never know which part I'm going to grade, and you never know when I'm going to grade it. This should only be your work. It should not be similar to the person next to you at all. This is not partner work, so I should not read the same analysis twice, and I shouldn't read the same wording of a summary twice at least. The only thing that may be similar is the vocab, because we might not know the same wording. We might have put the same definition. Okay. I'll be in to clarify any questions about this on Monday, but I'll look over what you got starting on Monday and probably a little bit on Tuesday as well. Have a great day. Keep being amazing. I will see you after the weekend. Have an incredible weekend.